What we're going to move to is the other part of freedom of religion. We talked about the Establishment Clause yesterday, right?
Sorry, one more question regarding the collage. Anything for the food, or does it have to actual picture?
They can be cartoons. They just need to be images.
Thank you.
Okay? Okay, so we talked about the Establishment Clause, and we talked about several different things. What does the Establishment Clause say about school prayer? You can't sponsor. The school can't sponsor or force or pressure kids to do it. Okay, but you can pray at school on your own. What? Thank you. What about government funding of items for religious schools?
It depends.
It depends. Usually, by the way, it's not okay. I gave you more cases showing that the exceptions, but usually it's not okay. Okay, there are some exceptions. What about making the kids salute the flag? We're going to talk about that today. That's going to be about the free exercise clause. And I'm going to go ahead and skip on to that. Okay? So what does it mean? First of all, free exercise clause means you can believe whatever you want. Whatever you think in that little head of yours, bless you. Whatever you think in that little head of yours is simply fine. And you can generally practice religion however you want. But there are limits. Okay? In fact, there is no constitutional right that is unlimited. Keep that in mind, okay? They all sometimes conflict with other rights. You guys listening?
Yeah.
They all sometimes conflict with other rights. And when they conflict, you have to make a decision about which is most important under the circumstances, okay? That includes the Second Amendment. A lot of Second Amendment fans they act like it's an unlimited right, but that is not true. You can regulate it. Okay? Now, what kinds of conflicts do we see with the free exercise clause? Okay? For one thing, you might have a religion that forbids actions that the government requires. For example, you have somebody who's a pacifist. Their religion doesn't believe in fighting or war. Okay? That means the religion forbids them from serving in the military when the government requires it. Now there's a way to deal with that, but it used to be you had to go ahead and serve, or you went to jail. Some people argue that they shouldn't have to send their kids to public school. They should be able to send them to private schools, religion-related schools, and courts have said you can do that. Okay? Actually, sending kids to public school forbids actions. I'm going to explain to you an instance in which these people, who are Amish, these are kids, right? Riding around in a little bike. You guys know who the Amish are?
Yeah.
Okay. They said that they didn't want to send their kids to school past the 8th grade. They should come home after that and work for the family on the farm. And the court said that was okay. We're going to talk about that just a little more in a minute, right? Some people say that getting medical treatment is wrong because God is there to heal you, right? But the government sometimes intercedes. If you're an adult, you can generally die in your bed if you want to, if you don't want to go get medical treatment. Kids are different, okay? And sometimes the courts intervene to get medical treatment for children. Sometimes the religion requires actions that society forbids. Okay? An example is smoking peyote. Peyote is an hallucinogen that some Native American religions smoke. They're required to do it and it gives them dream visions and things like that. Okay? Also, we told the Mormons they couldn't have polygamy, even though it was part of their religion. So, Wisconsin versus Yoder is a case that you need to know. It's the one free exercise case that you need to know. The Yoders were the Amish, and the Yoders wanted to bring their kids home after 8th grade, and the court said that because that was their free exercise of religion, they could do that. Okay? Now, when you look at these cases, I've given you, there's one missing on here, but I've given you cases that you should read and mark up this weekend, the descriptions that I gave you in the packet. Has everybody got the packet?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What you need to focus on in Wisconsin versus Yoder, as well as everything else, again, is what the facts are, what the decision is, what the reasoning is, And that basically gives you what the majority opinion is. Okay? Looking at what the dissenters said will help you understand better what the majority said. Now, moving on. So here are some cases where the Supreme Court upheld laws, government, state, federal laws, inhibiting religious practice, okay? In these cases, they said, free exercise of religion doesn't mean you get to do this. You don't get to, if the law is against this, you still don't get to do it just because of your religion, okay? One example is polygamy, which got decided in the 1800s. Another example is blue laws. A lot of places used to, and some still do, have blue laws. A blue law prohibits you from operating your business on Sunday. It's the day of rest, right, for Christians. And who objected to this law? Jewish people, among others, because the Jews rest on Saturdays, and they wanted to have their businesses open on Sundays. The court said, no, you don't get to do that. I think none of the businesses in my hometown are open on Sundays either, except for restaurants. What'd you say?
Wait, no to what? Is it
They couldn't keep their business open on Sunday when the law said you can't. And they claimed, well, it's our religion. Our religion allows us to do that. And the court said that's not enough. Okay? If you have a school, even a religious school, you have a tax exemption. Okay? But if your school racially discriminates, you don't get to take the tax exemption. Okay? This happened a lot in the South, after Brown versus Board of Education. A lot of white people established private schools that wouldn't let people of color in. The government wanted to build a road through burial grounds sacred to Native Americans, and the court said that was okay.
Then again, when is government, say something like
This one is really stupid. Okay, there was a Jewish Air Force captain who wanted to wear his yarmulke, this little cap on his head, and the court said that just because his religion required it didn't mean that he got to do it. And you know what the rationale was, what the government said, why he shouldn't be able to wear his yarmulke? Because of national security. It just illustrates how if you go into court and say national security, they will let you do a lot of things that they shouldn't let you do, in my opinion. Okay, now, some laws have been struck down as violations of the Free Exercise Clause. Okay, what are some examples of those? First of all, you can send your kids to private religious schools instead of public schools. You cannot require kids to participate in flag salutes. There are actually people, including the Jehovah's Witnesses, that don't believe in giving allegiance to anyone other than God. Okay, to them, saluting the flag is like claiming the government is more important than God. And the court has said you don't have to salute the flag. Of course, now we apply that to everybody, and you guys all stay seated when we do it. Do any of you salute the flag? Good for you,
Only
Maddie.
when my mother is around. Oh.
If you are a church and you want to hire certain people, you don't want to hire women, you can do that. Okay. I would argue that if you're a church and you're running a business out there, that's different. But nobody's asking me. Okay, this is a new one. Obamacare required insurance, health insurance, right? And one of the things that it did was it required the insurer to provide contraceptive coverage for contraceptives, which is hard to get. Part of the discrimination against women, in my opinion. Okay? But now we're letting these companies, okay, who are usually religious, companies like Chick-fil-A, they are saying that their religion prohibits them from paying for insurance for contraceptives. And they're letting them get out of it.
So they're letting people get pregnant,
Yes.
but they don't support abortion.
No.
Something doesn't add up.
what is the image of a woman that comes out of that? Barefoot and pregnant. You cannot refuse to hire somebody or fire them because of their religion. That is not okay. And you have to work around their hours. If they don't want to work on Sundays because of their religion, you have to work around that. This is a recent one. Prisoners have always been, well, for a long time have been able to practice their religion. But recently the Supreme Court said that a prisoner who was going to be executed, okay, he was getting ready to go to the death chamber, okay, he was Muslim, and he wanted his imam there with him. Okay, their religious figure. If you're a Christian, do you get a religious figure there with you to pray before you save your soul before you die? Yeah, you do. The court said no to the imam. I don't understand that. I haven't read the decision. I don't know why they said that, but that's what they said.
National security.
Yeah, national security. Exactly. I don't know where my pointer went. This is peyote. Just so you know. You go home and say, Ms. Wessel showed me a picture of peyote. Okay, in the peyote case, the court said that the law preventing drug use was valid even though this church said it violates our free exercise rights. Okay? And the court said the reason that it was okay was that it did not discriminate. It didn't target this group. It just said, no peyote, no drugs. Now, obviously, that picks on a particular religion, if you ask me. And there were a lot of people who were very upset about this decision in Smith. Okay? They felt like the language the court had used was going to make it a lot easier than the members of Congress wanted for people to infringe somebody's exercise of religion. So, what is one of the things that Congress can do if they don't like what the Supreme Court does? They can change the law. What they did was they went back and they said in federal cases, it only applies to federal cases, that you have to meet a different standard, a stricter standard. The name of this law was the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. It requires you, if a law interferes with religious practices, the government has to show that the law is narrowly tailored, targeted, in pursuit of a compelling government interest. In other words, if the government is going to infringe your rights, the government has to have a really, really important reason. Okay? And the law has to be targeted to that reason. It has to be specific, not group in a whole bunch of other stuff. Okay, that's free exercise. As you saw, a lot of the free exercise stuff basically depends upon the facts. What you need to know is that the law protects your exercise of religion, and they can't pass a law that infringes that unless there's a darn good reason. Probably a damn good reason. Now, we're going to move on to the First Amendment, to the rest of the First Amendment. There's speech and press and assembly, also in the First Amendment. Okay. The first thing to remember is that we do not usually keep somebody from publishing something before they publish it. That would be prior restraint, what we call prior restraint. You can't do that. Okay? Almost always, except sometimes in the cases of national security. Okay? Sometimes we make an exception for that. But generally speaking, you have to publish first and then somebody can sue you afterwards. All right? Exceptions, school newspapers, they can keep you from publishing. Although the law says that you're supposed to be able to publish pretty much what you want in a school newspaper, okay? Unless it harms the schools, unless it hurts the learning environment, or it promotes danger of some sort.
Oh, also,
Yeah.
have you seen a movie called The Wave?
No.
It's like what we read in sociology about conformity.
Oh.
Yeah, it's really cool. It also newspapers, they still have to block the person from sending newspapers.
Yeah. Okay, another example we talked about was the Pentagon Papers, but the Pentagon Papers that is not an exception, okay? Because in that case, even though they claimed national security, the court disagreed. They said it's not enough in this case. And they let them publish the Pentagon Papers. You guys remember what the Pentagon Papers were? Descriptions of the U.S. activity in Vietnam that had been kept secret.
Oh, that was.
Good luck.
Good luck, you
I was
guys.
thinking about Pentagon Papers.
The girl's so strong.
Oh my goodness. You guys are gonna do amazing.
Yeah, I know.
Wait, let's
do.
What is it? MIDI?
Oh. You're gonna do fine.
Everybody take back their comments.
Okay, so the basic attitude we take toward the First Amendment, toward speech, is that all of your speech is protected except, and we're going to talk about the except first. What speech is not protected?
Free speech.
Hate speech is protected.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It absolutely is.
Right.
Okay? You have to just develop a thick skin. Unless there are unlesses, okay? Unless it causes violence or something like that. That could be a problem. So when we look at what speech is allowed and what speech isn't allowed, we do what we do in the rest of government. We look at the individual interests at stake in protecting speech. And we also look at the government's interest in law and order, which is our interest in safety, okay? So the first type of speech that you can't engage in is speech that disturbs the public order. Now you might say that's hate speech, but let's talk more specifically about what you can't do. For one thing, you can't yell fire, fire in a crowded theater. That's dangerous. People can be killed. And you can't do things that create dangerous situations, okay? Second, speech that provokes a clear and present danger of substantive evils. That's real clear, isn't it? Isn't that abundantly clear?
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah, we know exactly what that is, don't we? Okay.
The people who don't know.
This comes from Schenck, another one of the cases you need to know. Schenck is from World War I. And what Schenck did, Schenck was against the war. And Schenck went out and gave out flyers to young men, urging them not to register for the draft, not to go fight. Okay? And they said, the court said, that creates a clear and present danger of substantive evils, harm the U.S. interest. That's really another national security thing.
National security.
Yeah, national security. Okay? We don't interpret this as narrowly as we used to. Okay? Let's look. So, another type of speech that we generally don't allow that's related to the last type is speech urging overthrow of the government. Can you guess what group prompted this concern? Who wants to overthrow the government that we think wants to overthrow the government? The commies. Okay? We assumed that if you were a commie, you wanted to overthrow the government. All right? Because there were communist leaders who said that, obviously. Okay? It was used during the Cold War against people accused of being communists, even though no one said they had committed any violent act. They had never urged anybody specifically to do this. Okay? But the fact that they were commies and they said something vaguely related to communism meant that they were violating the public order. As I said, this is interpreted more narrowly now. Now, basically, you can advocate violent overthrow, okay, in the abstract. You can theorize about it. But if I go over to Kenny and Herons and I say, guys, it's time. It's time to overthrow the government. Let's go out and do it. No, we're going to go do it. We're going to walk outside and we're going to march to D.C. and we're going to overthrow the government. Can't do that. You can't actually urge people, incite them to imminent lawless action. Imminent is now, right? Let's go. Okay, you can't do that. Okay, so that's speech that disturbs the public order. Yeah. Yes?
If you said let's overthrow the government sometime, at some point, would that count?
You'd have to be more specific than at some point. If you set a date, that might be a problem.
April 11th at 2:45 p.m.
420, we're gonna overthrow the government.
420, yep.
Second category of speech that is excluded from First Amendment protection is obscenity. Do you know what obscenity is?
Sexual.
Yeah, somehow sexually lascivious, sexually offensive, kinds of stuff. Okay? Now, how do we tell what is obscene? One judge famously said, "I know it when I see it."
Oh.
Charmaine, you okay? Charmaine? Okay, so the court actually set out a test in Miller versus California. It said there are 3 things you need to look at. Number 1, does the work, taken as a whole, not pointing to a specific part, but taken as a whole, appeal to a prurient interest in sex? Okay, so basically this means something that's offensive, that would really bother people, but it's more than just being offensive, okay? And it's one of those things that we do on a case-by-case basis, okay? Second, you look to see if the work shows patently offensive sexual conduct that is specifically defined by an obscenity law. They have to give you notice, they have to give you fair warning that what you're doing is a problem, okay? And this is an important and, the work, taken as a whole, lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. This came up because there were artists who were doing sexually provocative things, and people said, well, those shouldn't be a violation of the law, they're art, or literary stuff. If it's got merit, if it appeals to the educated and informed, then you get an exception. How does this play out in real life? For one thing, the court has allowed juries to use local standards. Okay, so when you judge what is obscene, you judge what the people in your community think is obscene. So a movie could be forbidden in one community and not in another community. Right? One thing that's always obscene, child porn. I gave a little speech this morning, I'll give it here too. If you guys have pictures, nude pictures of people under 18 on your phones, or you send them, don't do that. Do you know what happens if you get caught? You get on the sex offender list. And you're going to be on it for the rest of your life. It's going to affect where you live. It's going to affect where you work. It's going to affect whether anybody ever, again, lets you around a kid. Okay? So just, a lot of kids don't know that, so I'm telling you now. Yeah. All right, now, let's look at some specific examples of how this played out. New Jersey had a nude dancing parlor in the town, a New Jersey town. Dancing parlor. You can tell this case is kind of old, okay? And they wanted to get rid of it. So what they did was they passed a law that said no live entertainment. No live entertainment in town. I would argue that it even includes the church choir singing the special on Sundays. Okay, and the court said that's too broad. You're restricting way too much. Remember the narrowly tailored language? This is not narrowly tailored. You want to stop the nude dancing parlor and you've stopped all entertainment. No. If your law specifically says nude dancing is banned, that's okay. Okay? That means the law is okay. But a law banning drive-in movies from showing nudity, specifically defined as bare breasts and bare pubic areas, okay? You can't, they said you can't do those things, and the court said that was too broad. So if you can make sense of those, good luck. Yeah. One of the problems with talking about cases like this is that you don't know all the facts, and that makes a difference, right? So sometimes it doesn't sound right, but once you look at it, it looks a little more sensible. The internet complicates things with speech. We have a law called the Communications Decency Act. It banned obscene material being sent across the internet to people under 18, and the court overturned it. It said that it didn't consider the Miller test that we looked at. The requirement that it have no scientific or literary merit. This would include artistic stuff, you know, okay? So they said no. This case, we actually do this in my law class. California made violent video games prohibited for people under 18. And that got overturned, okay? Got overturned, wasn't dangerous enough. Okay, so we've done speech that disturbs the public order. We've done obscenity. Now we're going to talk about defamation. Basically talking shit about somebody. Okay? Defamation has to be a false statement. It cannot, if it's true, it's an absolute defense in this country. If you guys took APUSH, you learned about Peter Zenger.
Yes.
Okay? Truth has been a defense in this country ever since Peter Zenger.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? So, the false statement has to be communicated to a third party. If I'm talking shit about Kenny, and it's just Kenny and me, just Kenny and me here, nobody else is here, can't be defamation. I have to say it to somebody else, because it has to harm Kenny in some way, usually harm to his reputation. Okay?
So basically high school.
Oh.
What?
That's basically high school.
Yeah.
In college and the workplace.
That's weird.
What did you
Wait, what? Huh?
Cereal before milk.
That's
Kenny is milk
weird.
before cereal.
I don't
Kenny?
know.
Get out.
I just defamed you.
Dana, delete yourself.
Isn't it true? It's not true.
Why would you want your cereal soft?
So that would be an
I'm sorry.
example of
I didn't use
defamation.
cereal.
This is a false statement.
No, it's
Okay,
cereal.
so we're
and-
deleting both Kenny and Dana.
Okay.
Cancel.
Oh my.
Now, keep in mind, it's hard to value the damage that occurs because of defamation. What's damage to your reputation worth in money? And so sometimes you don't actually get any money out of these cases, okay? But you do get vindication, right?
What's that?
That you were right.
Oh.
You're vindicated. You've been shown to be right. Yeah, very expensive vindication, that's right. Now, there are two types of defamation, very simple. If it's written defamation in a newspaper, for example, it's called libel. If it's spoken defamation, like in a speech, it's called slander. That's the difference between those two things, which you've probably heard of. Okay, now, I'm sorry this picture's in front of this, but what this says is that the standard for proving defamation for famous people is tougher than for ordinary people. If Kenny wants to sue Herentz for saying that he's a milk before cereal guy, okay, all Kenny has to do is prove that Herentz should have taken more care in finding out whether this was true or not. Okay, it's a lot easier standard. You should have been careful. You should have been more careful. Okay, if you're famous, that's not enough. We figure if you're famous, you want to be famous, and that means you're in the public eye, and people are going to talk shit about you. You have to get used to it. If you want to sue somebody and you're famous, what you have to show is that they either knew or should have known that what they were saying was false. Okay? It's harder to prove. Can I prove that Herentz absolutely knew that it was false, or can I prove that he should have known that it was false? I don't know yet. That it's going to be a lot harder than proving he should have been more careful. Okay? Now, for this, yes?
Does this apply to dead people? Like, if you slander?
No,
Like,
no.
it doesn't at all?
no, I don't think so. I don't think so. That's an interesting question, CLO.
What about their family members? Thank you, Portia.
But there are reasons why you might want it to apply, okay? But I don't think it does, based on what I know about other areas of the law, but I'd have to check to be sure. This rule that requires famous people to show more, to prove more, is from New York Times versus Sullivan. Okay? And that's another case you need to know. Okay, so we've talked about obscenity, defamation, and speech that disturbs the public order. Now we're going to talk about a category that's not prohibited. It's actually allowed. It's called symbolic speech. We talked about Tinker yesterday and the armbands, right? The fact that they had a message, a political message that they were making. And the point of tinker is that the First Amendment goes beyond the written or spoken word. It reaches things, actions that nevertheless communicate a message, okay? Examples, tinker and the armbands. Okay, here are the tinkers with their peace sign on their armbands. Burning the flag is protected if it's a political statement. If all it is to do is that you hate me and you just want to burn my flag, then it's not okay.
So you can burn
It's not going to bother me either, so don't worry about
You
it.
can burn the American flag and say like an art piece to make a political statement.
Yeah.
Alright.
Now, on the other side of things, there are the St. Patrick's Day parades in Boston and elsewhere in the East. Some of them exclude LGBT people from the parade. And the courts have said that's okay because it's run by a private organization. If they think there are no Irish queer people, they're wrong. Right? Correct? Okay, more speech that's, excuse me. Examples of speech that are not protected that you can't do even though they're symbolic. Burning your draft card. In the Vietnam War, people who register for the draft, men, always men, had a draft card that they had to carry around with them. And for reasons related to the importance of this card, the court said, this is not symbolic speech, this is an action, you can't protect this. You cannot protect burning a cross with intent to intimidate. Who's that? Who do we know about, who does that? KKK, right? Cross with the intent to intimidate. You guys know they burn crosses on people's lawns?
Why do they do that? Isn't that trespassing?
Yes. But you,
Assumes the trespass.
yeah, well, that assumes that the cops aren't included in the Ku Klux Klan that are burning the cross on your lawn.
Oh, that's
This
a good
one,
point.
this one, is New York versus some of this in here?
New York Times?
Yeah, New York Times.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Where?
It's alphabetical, so it would be after the M's. The Marbury, it's after Marbury.
I did not realize it was an alphabetical order.
Yeah, it is. It's an alpha order. Also, you do not have the right to have a Confederate license plate on your license, Confederate flag on your license plate. Okay, now let's talk about trials, because one of the things you can do with a trial, and a lot of places do, is they have closed trials. They try people without any public awareness of it. In our country, trials are supposed to be open to the public, all right? But sometimes that conflicts with a criminal defendant's right to a fair trial. We've got different interests here.
For the last slide about the Confederate, like, do people have Confederate flags on their lawn? Is that protected?
What these people were saying is they wanted you know how California has special license plates?
Yeah.
Okay, these people wanted a special license plate of their own with a Confederate flag. And some states allowed it, but this state, I think it was Texas actually, that wouldn't allow it.
Surprising.
I could be wrong about that though. And they said if the state doesn't want to let you have this, then you can't have it. It doesn't matter what you're,
So people can raise a Confederate flag and not get any recognition.
there was a story one time that I read about a guy who was really great. He was black. He decided to retake the Confederate flag. That the Confederate flag was there because he had some theory in his mind about how it was helping save people from slavery, and he was going to take it back. So he started driving around in his pickup truck with a Confederate flag on the back of his thing. You know what happened?
We got mad.
All the white guys stopped using it. They stopped flying it because this black guy was going around flying the Confederate flag. Isn't that funny? Yeah, this was in a story, but I thought it was very funny.
Is that actually?
Okay, so on the one hand, you have the press's right to cover a trial and the public's right to know about the trial. And on the other hand, you have the need to give the defendant a fair trial. Okay? So one of the things that's clear, that the Supreme Court has made clear, is that trials have to be open to the public. There are some exceptions, like for trade secrets, but basically trials are open to the public. Okay? And there are shield laws in some states. We talked about this before, that we don't have one in the federal government. Shield shield laws protect people, reporters, from having to disclose their sources. Okay, they don't want to disclose their sources because their sources might not talk to them. And the court has always said, if there's a defendant that claims they need the information from that source, the court is going to make them disclose that or send the reporter to jail. Okay? Because the right to a fair trial is important if there's evidence available. This is just I thought you might be interested in this little case from Stanford. The Stanford Daily newspaper one time took pictures of a protest, and the cops came in and said, "We want your pictures." They had a search warrant, "We want your pictures." Why? Because they wanted to identify the people who had committed crimes during the protest. And the Stanford Daily fought it all the way to the Supreme Court and lost. Yes,
Since trials are open, that's why we can just go into the court.
that's correct. Now, you can't for juvenile trials. Juveniles are protected. Trade secrets are protected. If a case is accusing the defendant of stealing their trade secrets and they're still secret, then they'll close the courtroom and they won't let people come in and listen to that part of it. Okay, next category is commercial speech. Commercial speech has historically not been protected as much as other speech. It's basically advertising. Okay, there's not the same urge to protect advertising as there is to protect political speech, supporting our government, our democracy. Okay, but it's been protected more and more lately. It's regulated by the FTC. Okay, they regulate advertising. They keep you from engaging in false advertising, which is another category of speech that isn't protected. Okay, you can't advertise something falsely and mislead people. Right? You can't use obscenity on TV and radio or in your ads, things like that. Okay. Now, earlier, back in the day, a lot of states protected people against certain kinds of advertising because they thought people would be gullible. Do you know the word gullible in the dictionary? Didn't work, huh? If you believe that, you're being gullible.
Oh,
Did you believe it?
So they protected people. They wouldn't let lawyers advertise. They wouldn't let you advertise medical products like prescription drugs and stuff, but they let you do that now. Okay, regulation of the public airwaves. We talked a little bit about this in the mass media unit. They regulate TV and radio licenses, okay? That's less important now because most people have cable TV, and cable TV allows you to shut a channel off, right? You can protect your kids from the porn channel. So with broadcast TV, you couldn't do that. Print media does not have to be licensed. Okay, we're almost done. We'll be done by the time class is over. Campaign spending, we also talked about. The first case to decide that campaign spending was a form of speech was called Buckley versus Vallejo. Okay, and then we talked about Citizens United in the last chapter, okay, where it said that corporations and unions have the right to free speech in elections and campaigns. Okay, that's a lot of stuff. We are not going to have that amount of stuff on any of the other rights. Just to hopefully that'll calm you down. There are two more things, though, to talk about with the First Amendment. The right to assembly, which involves two different rights, freedom of assembly and freedom of association. Okay, what is freedom of assembly? It's your right to gather together with people to make a statement. Okay, a protest, a parade, something like that. All right? Now, we can limit you. If you want to do that, that's great, but we can limit you. They're called time, place, and manner restrictions. We can tell you when you can have your parade, we can tell you where you can have your parade, and we can tell you how you can have your parade. We can keep you from having your parade in the middle of the night in a residential area with loudspeakers. Okay? There's a good reason for that, right? They're called time, place, and manner restrictions. Very clear legal term in First Amendment law. Okay? Examples of people who have been protected in their right of assembly. Reverend Phelps, along with his family and his church in Wichita, Kansas, hate gay people. Hate them. Believe they should be abolished from the earth. And they go all over the country at different events and they protest gay people. This incident happened with regard to a soldier that had died in the military. Okay? He wasn't gay or anything, but the Phelpses came to protest at his funeral because they believe he was military, and they believe that the military is wrong in allowing gay people to participate in the military. And these are the kinds of signs they have. Pretty nasty signs. But the court said he could do that. In Skokie, Illinois, they mostly have Jewish people there, and the KKK decided they wanted to march in Skokie, the KKK in Chicago. And that went all the way to the Supreme Court. Okay, I think it was the Supreme Court. And the court said Skokie had to let them march. They never did, though. They never did actually do it. Finally, abortion clinics, women's health care clinics that perform abortions. What was happening was that the pro-life people were getting in the face of all the people coming into the clinic. They would run up in their face and yell at them and tell them they were killing their baby, et cetera, et cetera. And so courts started creating buffer zones. They would tell the pro-life protesters that they couldn't get within a certain distance of the clinic. Okay? That's what they did. And those are legit. Final slide. Freedom of association is basically your freedom to hang out with whoever you want. In communist countries, they sometimes have laws that preclude that say you can't have 3 people or more together without permission, because you never know what you're going to be talking about. In this country, it came up when Alabama tried to get the NAACP to produce its membership list to the state. The state wanted to know all the people that were in the NAACP because, of course, it was against that. And the court said, you can't get this. This is like violating their right of freedom of association. Okay? And then there were some law schools that wanted to keep military recruiters from coming in, and the court said, you gotta let them in. You could talk against them, you can say whatever you want about how bad you think they are, but you gotta let them come in too. And that's basically the theory of speech in our country. Letting people go out into the speech marketplace, say whatever they want, and let the people buy whatever it is they want. And if people don't like it, then people won't speak. Okay? Now, what do you need to do this weekend? You need to read and mark up these cases in your packet that I gave you. Okay? And I put this on, I left out Brown. I put that in there too. It's online. Okay? What you need to do is mark them up, read them. The things you need to know, you need to pay attention to, are these things: the facts, the decision, the reasoning, and the majority opinion, which is the same thing as the facts, decision, and reasoning.